Of course, last week, the tangi of the Māori King, Kingi Tuheitia, and of course the anointing and coronation of his successor. So all eyes on Tūranga Waiwai, and well, even David Seymour was in attendance for a time there. A week is a long time in politics. Now David Seymour hitting the headlines for perhaps the opposite reasons as his treaty principles bill kicks in, and it seems people of every race and creed have an opinion about that one. Joining us on the program, Dr Bryce Edwards. Bryce, kia ora, good morning.
Morena, Andrew.
This was always going to be a contentious one, and I think perhaps David Seymour relied on it being contentious. However, particularly given the timing of everything that has unflowed within the last fortnight, it seems that the government is doubling down on not backing it beyond its first reading, but yes, certainly some heat being generated by discussions at the moment.
Look, yes, you're absolutely right. And there's been heat on issues relating to ethnicity, race relations, the treaty, building over years and years. So this isn't something new, but it's true that the ACT parties bill that they negotiated as part of their coalition agreement with National is really the most controversial, polarizing thing that this government is doing. But yes, as you just said in your introduction, National have only agreed to support it to its first reading and to a select committee. And so we keep on seeing a few more details of what this is going to involve. The Prime Minister talked after his cabinet meeting on Monday about how it's going to go to a full select committee, which is going to take a full 6 months, as select committee processes normally do.
Yep.
There'd been some pressure on the government to make that a shorter one, but essentially David Seymour has prevailed on that. And yeah, I mean, National's in a difficult spot on this because I think the parties divided themselves on this issue, but they're also aware that there's a lot of support amongst their own supporters, but the wider public for this bill. We've only seen, I believe, one poll on this, and this was back last year sometime, where it was something like 60% of the population said that they supported this bill. But interestingly, only 45% of that poll wanted to have a referendum on it.
Yeah, and it's 100% certain at this point that we won't have a referendum, that it will die in the select committee stage. However, interesting the feedback to this one, and lots of strong rhetoric. But honestly, wanted to get your view on. I mean, it seems obvious that we need to have a discussion about the Treaty of Waitangi and what it means for us as a nation. Perhaps David Seymour's bill is a little bit of a blunt instrument in that regard. He's starting with a particular ideological position, and there's a lot of pushback on that. But in some ways, does he have a point? Is this something that we need to discuss like grown-ups, or is it too sensitive? Is it too much of a sacred cow for our nation?
Well, that is the big question. And there's a lot of people saying, well, these things are difficult, but maybe, we have managed to paper over the cracks, and let's just keep those cracks papered over.
Yep.
Yes, it's difficult having these principles that no one really knows what they are, and they're decided by the courts. But, if we debate them, we might end up in civil war. We might end up with a lot of divisiveness. And I think that's, somewhat true. But I do tend to side with David Seymour and thinking a debate is still the way forward. And I mean, I don't have a great understanding of his bill. I mean, no one does because no one's seen it yet. But my feeling is that the bill is wrong and that it's going to be problematic. But I think David Seymour is correct in saying that there is a problem, that we don't know what the principles are and they haven't been defined, and the courts keep on and government departments keep on interpreting them in different ways. And ultimately, yes, it should be for the public to kind of determine what these things are in a democracy. So I'm quite favourable to having that discussion.
Yeah.
And I'm rather disturbed when people say, no, we can't have it.
I've already decided what you should think. So we don't
Yeah.
need to discuss it any further. I mean, and look, there is more nuance than that, and it is, to be fair, that there is perhaps a broader and deeper understanding of te tiriti and what that means from a Māori point of view, and Pākehā with opinions on it, possibly slightly racist or xenophobic opinions, isn't necessarily helping the conversation in that regard. At the end of the day, though,
Yeah.
this is a coalition government. There is a coalition agreement. Christopher Luxon would not be Prime Minister were it not for the support of David Seymour. This has got to move forward. It can't be scrapped before we get to the first reading, as some people are calling for.
Oh, I think that's absolutely right. And people shouldn't be so worried that it's going to a first reading and that we're going to have this debate. I mean, I think there's great parallels here with what Britain went through with debates around whether to stay in the European Union or not. And ultimately, they held a referendum, and ultimately that the one side of it did win, and it caused great angst. I don't think that debate was held very well in Britain. I don't think anyone managed it very well, but ultimately there was an issue where a large portion of the public felt discontent about the status quo. And I think we've got that here. And so, and often it's the political parties or even churches that are actually divided. So National doesn't really have one voice on this, even though you've got Luxon at the top. And yes, so it was just fascinating to see 400 church leaders come out this week and put a very strong condemnation forward of this. And I welcome that, because I think we should have more participation in politics from all parts of society, and including churches. So I think more is better. And of course, it's caused lots of kind of theological arguments about whether their arguments did align with Christianity or were based on Scripture. And there's been some humorous stuff as well.
Certainly,
but I certainly do have some questions about to what extent that letter did represent the churches or the congregations of those churches or not. And I'm sure there's a large amount, whether it's a small minority or a large majority, I'm sure they weren't unanimous in
exactly. Like there's no unanimity of thought in the National Party or in politics generally. I think there's a diversity of thought within Christianity. These were a representative, not representing the congregations, but individuals saying, hey, us, the undersigned, this is what we think. I would say, I mean, David Seymour pushed back and says that was undemocratic, but I think it's the definition of democracy in some ways, people saying, hey, this is my view on it. But yeah, I mean, anyway.
Religions aren't meant to be democratic. Churches, don't normally vote on who their leader is going to be, and I don't think that's not a criticism. That's how they've designed it. Nonetheless, it would be good to start seeing what grassroots congregations think about this. So having the leaders, kick this off, I think they shouldn't therefore invite their congregations to be able to debate it.
Oh, exactly. And hey, I think circling back to referenda and Brexit and all that type of stuff, I think David Seymour's understanding of Christianity and church structures is about as good as most people's understanding of the treaty principles. And I mean, you were talking before about Brexit beforehand. The dangerous part of referendum is if you've got people with very little understanding of the issues making decisions about what things mean. Should we leave this to the judiciary, or is this something for Parliament to decide, I suppose, is the question?
No, I strongly believe that, you're absolutely right, that there is ignorance, there's a lack of education about these things, but the answer to that is more debate, more education, and like I say, I welcome church leaders kicking off that debate, adding into it, and there should be more to come from it, and we should hear the other church leaders that might not agree with them or their congregations. And I don't think this is where we should just rely on academics or broadcasters or church leaders to to say what's right. They'll have one perspective, but we need participation on these things because it is quite a heartfelt issue.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people that do feel strongly about it. So,
and honestly, if we're not going to have a referendum on it, let's just have a conversation. Let's bring this into a public space and not let judges make decisions, or perhaps even more dangerously, to have what the treaty means be decided by the Waitangi Tribunal, who again have a particular ideological point of view and vested interest, perhaps. This debate, I'm sure, will continue whether or not it happens at a select committee or through referenda, and all of us having a broader understanding of what Te Tiriti means for us as a people going forward. I think we'll be a stronger nation because of it.
Oh, look, that's exactly my thoughts. So yes, National or anyone in Parliament might try to bring this current Treaty Principles Bill to an earlier conclusion, but the public will keep talking about this beyond this. And sometimes you have to be careful if you try and suppress debate. It ends up springing up somewhere or another. So you can't stop people talking about something that concerns them.
And if you do try and stop people talking about it, perhaps that is an attack on democracy.
I think so.
Sorry, a bit of a frog in the throat there. Not getting emotional or anything. Hey, Bryce, appreciate your insight and wisdom as always. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Andrew.